Wednesday afternoon, it's 4 p.m. in Central Europe, and it's Space Café WebTalk time. Our Space Café today, 33 minutes with Laura and Edwards, will begin very soon. Thanks for joining us today about our topic of thoughts on the future of space and Earth. As always, we appreciate your participation and ongoing feedback. SpaceWatch.Global, as you all know, is a Europe-based online platform for information in and about space and new space activities in a geopolitical context. And I would like to thank all our private and corporate supporters that showed their commitment to keeping our independent journalism alive. We really appreciate that. I know many of you are familiar with our website, our bi-weekly and daily newsletters, and the Space Café podcast. And our latest episode featured Stephen Ramage on Earth observation, and we just put it out today. Just give it a listen. It's as cool as always. For all our fans of audio content, we have new episodes on the Space Café radio, and more about to come the next days because we are recording right now a few of them. So stay tuned here as well. We are also keeping our fan shop open online for you to support us actively and become a Space Watcher, a real one. If you have missed any of our previous web talks, we have an archive available on our website in the event section and on YouTube. So, I met my guest a few years ago at a KINANET Venice event, and that was 2019. And for those that doesn't know about KINANET, it is the mother of all unconferences. It's about the big problems of our world, where brilliant minds come together. And I was deeply impressed by the event and also by Laura. So fast forward, a very warm welcome to the show today, Laura and Edwards. And for those of you that doesn't know Laura that well, just a few words about her. Laura is an innovation catalyst named last year among the top 50 leaders in space tech. And she is a NASA Datanaut, a core member of the Oxford Space Initiative, a TED resident, a board member and crowdfunder at the UC Irvine Living Systems Collaboratory, and Buckminster Fuller Design Science Studio resident. What words. She served on the State Department Advisory Committee for Technology and Innovation, Public-Private Partnership, and was in 2019 as a Women to Watch in Innovation. Laura consults and speaks on sustainable innovations, system thinking, diversity of thought, the potential of true AI-human collaboration, and human thriving in space. And we are looking forward to hear all about the above in the next half an hour. Welcome, Laura, again.
Thank you, Torsten. It's lovely to be here. And yes, it feels like a natural extension of a conversation we started and haven't stopped years ago. All right, you guys are going to force me to put my glasses on. Okay, there you go. Go ahead.
Good. So let's start. Let's start with easy questions. What does a NASA Datanaut do?
Well, I'm one of the lucky people that got to be part of a NASA outreach program. NASA has done many different kinds of public education or public engagement programs. This happened to be one that was not exclusively for women, but emphasized women with some attachment to data. And I have had a long personal interest and commitment to the Open Data Commons. And a friend in the first group of NASA Datanauts, Dr. Kate Stone, an amazing inventor and artist, recommended me. So it's as it is now, it's a group of about 300 of us around the world. And we were given extraordinary access and insights into the data flow process. And I had grand ambitions of helping organize the much larger amount of NASA data. And I still have those ambitions, but it's a wonderful community outreach, basically.
So, and you're going then to schools and teach them about the NASA data, or you're knocking on the doors of your neighbors and say, did you ever thought about NASA data? So what is it about? How does it feel?
No, we didn't have any duties. We just got a lot of privileges to be able to do self-directed projects. So some people, the group, I would say most of them are actual data scientists. I consider myself a data activist because I've been passionate and committed to the information architecture of open data for a long time. And space is an area that I really believe needs to have the data organized while it's still a small enough industry, a giant enough sector, but a small enough industry. And some of the NASA Datanauts are artists who could use access to the data to make incredible displays and pieces. So it's really like Cindy Chin, who we both know. Cindy's a NASA Datanaut, and she does things like help host the hackathons, the space app hackathon. But she's not required to do any of that. We just have access and relationships to do some of that outreach. So we're emissaries, but it's very informal, but we were given a long program of incredible access to NASA scientists and experts.
No, I think that's absolutely important. And one of the big issues we all have in communication is how to reach the other 99% of people. And I mean, if we are not using their language, what do we think, how they perceive the science data? But going to the other activities you're engaged with, I mean, we all know Oxford. And I know you have been over here in Europe a month ago. So what is the Oxford Space Initiative? Is that a company or is that what is that?
It grew out of a really wonderful program, I think the same year that I met you, called Future Skies. The intention of the group that we've been calling ourselves the Oxford Space Initiative is to engender a global conversation around the ecosystem, the comprehensive ecosystem to include space commerce and governance. So there's as you know, and when you do these talks, there's a lot of understandable emphasis on the private sector and the venture and of course the hardware and those aspects. And there's so much more to space than rovers and rockets, as cool as they are. And it's the purpose of the initiative, or at least our ongoing goal, is to spur research into the social sciences, to put them on a par, or to get them to a par and at the table with the engineering and aerospace. And right now that expertise and that research funding hasn't been there. And we believe strongly, and I'm sure we'll talk about it in some of the other questions, that it is time for the other aspects of human culture to have a space perspective and expertise, so that we can talk about things like how will we govern a large space station or a colony, or how do we get ready for what is not just coming, it's happening.
As we have just over 33 minutes, so it's short, so we're doing it
sorry.
one by one. So right into the topic, what questions should we be asking about space? And we is not the space sector, I assume we is humanity.
Well, at the most basic level, I would ask everyone everywhere to ask themselves, whose vision of space do they want? Right? And I like to say, well, the eccentric billionaires, well, there's pluses and minuses with that. Militaries around the world, military/space forces, there's pluses and minuses to that. The engineers and scientists who are doing absolutely miraculous things, but not necessarily asking the questions about consequences. So when I say, whose vision of space do we want? We are at the edge of a frontier. We are stepping into a frontier. And in all of human history, we don't have a great track record of thinking through any possible consequences when it comes to frontiers. And I'd like to see us do better going into space. And we can do that. We have the ability to communicate on a global level. Here we are having a global streaming chat about that. So I do believe that we can't sleepwalk into space, that we have to ask ourselves questions about, are we going to bring all of our colonial baggage? Are we, can we do better? Can we at least think through the choices that we're making? I certainly don't have all the answers, and I don't even want to have them, but I want there to be a global dialogue, and I don't want space, which will ultimately be much bigger than even Earth today. I don't want it decided by a very few people in a very few institutions. That's not okay. Space belongs to all of us. So be a global citizen. I mean, be a space citizen, be a universal citizen.
But are we naive in believing that space belongs to everyone? I mean, sure, there's the Outer Space Treaty, there's all this regulation, and there's all this saying, but is it a naive thinking forward? Because you mentioned a number of the stakeholders earlier. Are they taking over it sooner or later?
No, not sooner or later. They're taking over right now. The closest thing to this is our pattern with the oceans, right? We have done an abysmal job as a planet and as a species at not only taking care of the oceans, but managing it. I mean, it's sort of a miracle that maritime law and commerce within it works as well as it does, but obviously it's a mess. It's a mess of piracy and dumping and crime and all sorts of things. And I am not I'm not saying we're building the Federation. I'm saying ask the questions. And so to the extent if we had more awareness around the oceans, I mean, true awareness, and believed we had a stake. And obviously we have a worldwide issue with sovereignty and agency and civic activity. And we're, from a distance, I'm sure this is a very interesting experimental time on our planet, but we're living through it, and it's tough going. And my point about space is that it is just far enough removed, and it is just relatable enough for everybody. Not everyone on the Earth will ever see an ocean, but everybody on Earth can look up at the sky, and they can. It's a choice in a connected world to have a voice in that. And so countries can make strategies around having a voice about what our shared space future is, and so can citizens. And again, all I'm saying is we should all start asking these questions. Businesses should start asking about their opportunities and responsibilities in our extended near future, near space. And the conversation needs to be started. And I'm just one of many people who are agitating at that.
It's good to hear. It's interesting that you say that space is closer to people than the ocean, because they see it every day. We perceive it a different way, maybe in Europe, or at least in our bubble that we're in, that people does not get a connection to space, but to the oceans. And they understand slowly that polluting plastic bottles in the ocean is not good. But space debris, it's not there. We can't see it. We can't touch it. They can't touch it. So, but that brings me to this point. The next point is, how do this commercial space exploration, and sustainability can ever go together? Is there a way? Because that means that capitalism has to be taken out of the equation.
Well, I don't necessarily think that. I also think that there's no point in discussing things that aren't going to happen. So I'm interested in a mission to make things better and ask better questions, but I am not thinking that there's magical solution to tomorrow, be kumbaya in space. Do I believe that what was the pair that you said? Space exploration and
commercial space and sustainability. Can that go together?
I think in many ways it already does, right? So we have unprecedented amounts of information about the Earth, and compared to all of human history, and that directly comes from 40 plus years of satellites. Mm-hmm. Period, right? The weather data, so many of the things that we take for granted that are not only all the technical applications in our life, but very specifically environmental monitoring. So we have extremely robust weather observation, and every week it seems like there's another flotilla of satellites that go up that add another aspect of extremely high-res granular geospatial data, mapping the Earth in very real time. And that's an extraordinary feedback loop for better agricultural practices on a business level, finding spills, seeing all sorts of things. So we have that is just the beginning of the tie between space, commercial space, and sustainability. So I think we did a session at COP26. I say we, it was organized through the Oxford Space Initiative. My colleague Nigel Greenhill organized that. And the whole topic of the session, it was a 2-hour session with a bunch of speakers, was about smart space investing to support climate action. And it was primarily around investing in all aspects of geospatial to provide much better information about environmental factors, including, in both directions, right? So there's lots of conversations, as you and I care about space debris very much, but also, of course, mostly Earth-facing geospatial feedback. So on a personal level, my point of view is there's a whole other side to sustainability and space commerce, and that is the conscious investment into what I call dual use technology. So many of the things that are needed on a technical level, and frankly on an expertise policy level, to address what's going on and what the opportunities and the challenges and the moral imperative of climate are also technologies and expertise and policy that will yield benefits in space. So companies and countries can make a choice. Obviously, we know so much of the world is facing water shortages. Well, that's one of the most instant pressing problems in all things space, right? Is how to deal with having enough water. And how to reuse it, how to be smart with it, how to grow food in a way that is sustainable in extremely harsh environments. Well, those things are technologies and things that could be applied much sooner here on Earth.
But do you think that these elements you just described are connected already? I'm totally agree with more sensors in space. We have a better picture. We do better monitoring, but we are not influencing anything what goes on Earth. So what is missing is the data taking out from that, the monitoring data are processed and then giving to the relevant institutions, agencies to do something with that, to enforce the usage of water to take actions. And do you see that happens already?
Well, it already is happening. There are lots of things, big giant economic sectors like shipping and agriculture are absolutely affected and are able, and so there may not be the, let's just say that different sectors and different players in those sectors have a different level of moral imperative around regeneration and stewardship of planet Earth. On the other hand, it saves them money. They make more money if they're more efficient and they're smarter with things. So the incentives to be efficient with water, with all, to avoid blowback and issues is extremely strong. So there's a large amount of supply chain and in particular big agriculture monitoring that is a win-win for the commercial sector and for the planet. There's a whole other aspect to your question of what is the enforcement of. We've known that people are doing terrible things out in the ocean forever, but we're terrible about enforcing it. It's getting there, and part of it is much like the fact that billions of people have cell phones, and there's video of things you couldn't imagine have captured and would have had consequences 10 years ago. And here we are, and we're getting there with the geospatial data in terms of it's going to be really hard to dump something and not have it register. Now, the enforcement is a separate issue, but your bigger question of is there a disconnect in the concept of commercial space and sustainability? I would say no. And that's part of what's exciting is that we're just at the beginning of a kind of analytics to do all kinds of cool things. Think about all the cool stuff that is done in cities around the open data using GPS and other open source or even proprietary data. We're just getting there. We're just starting to have the opportunity to take the petabytes of data coming down from the satellites and do really cool things with that. So we're just starting.
On that note of geospatial data, I just want to remind people to listen to the new podcast we brought out this morning with Stephen Ramage, and he is the Chief Engagement Officer of the GEO, of the Group of Earth Observation Specialists in Geneva. So it's really worth to listen and to touch a number of these points you just mentioned, Laura. I think the next 3 decades, 2 decades, whatever it is, are everything for us.
Yeah, me too.
And how we are sleepwalking. So, I mean, you mentioned that before.
Yeah.
How can we get around that? How can we take it into action? How can we wake up people that are sleepwalking into this disaster? And I mean, we have a question here from AC who points into that direction that we are taking the stuff from Earth just in space, our conflicts that we have that are at the moment, at least for us here in Europe, very, very present, but we might take it just to space. So
I'll back up a second and say I completely agree about and it's the reason that I've started speaking out and speaking anywhere where I get the opportunity to bring people together to have an interdisciplinary dialogue and agitate as much as I can in any way I can to help get interdisciplinary research and have a different group of folks at the table talking about these considerations. I sometimes call it design thinking for space, but it is, I do believe really strongly in that with enough money and math and a dash of political will that comes and goes, we're going places. Those things are happening. I think most of us believe that it's happening. On the other hand, will we like it when we get there? Will we do anything actually interesting? Will we thrive? All right. At the end of the day, our mental construct of what being in space is like or will be like is based on 100 years of a certain kind of science fiction and 50 years of science fiction television and movies. And it's ultimately sort of a sterile expedition-based paramilitary kind of operation. And that I don't want to live in a paramilitary future. And so we need to, it takes time, right? Look at our 5,000 plus year experiment in human self-governance. It's a mixed bag, right? But some things have worked and they work at different scales. And my bigger point is that there are lots of ways that humans can organize themselves, and different cultures and different times and different circumstances and certainly scale impact what is the right choice for a given time. But we can talk about it. We are not locked into any of this. In terms of the next 30 years is what I'm very focused on. And I believe that we would all be well served at taking a systems approach to looking at the next 30 years, even just as an exercise. I'll consider the fact we have breathless conversations about climate change. Absolutely, massive existential issue. We're starting to have very interesting dialogues around space and those opportunities and responsibilities. That's the second existential thing that is happening. A third is the advent and penetration of AI and quantum computing. We're barely getting an inkling of how that, again, can and will likely change everything. And then I would add a fourth, which is the potential of universal connectivity, right? What happens when all 7+ billion people are connected? Right now we're at like 4. Like, what happens when everybody can log in, has information, can connect? And with that universal connectivity is the other side, which is universal surveillance. So those 4 things are each unto themselves existential, humanity-changing forces. They are all happening at the same time. We never talk about them as if they're together. They are part of very complicated system factors, and one affects the other. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about how climate is happening, this extreme climate change, and this era of racing to mitigate the impact is happening at the same time as we're in this baby space era, where whatever we do in this next 30 years in space might be space for the next 1,000 years. We might set those patterns in motion, but we're acting as if, we're very myopic. Oh, we're going to get to here. We'll do this. Even space debris is extremely important, but it's a very near issue. It's not what will happen farther out. That makes sense of it. Like, all of these things need to be considered. Not to the extent that it paralyzes us and we can't look at individual things and delve into, but they do affect each other, and they are happening at the same time. And there's a missed opportunity in overlapping dialogue and in IP transfer between those 4 sectors, and that seems a shame to me.
I hear you, and it's interesting to listen to you on that. From my observation, we had climate crisis came up to our table the last years as we saw the climate in our regions where we are is changing gradually. We have the hotter summer, we have the droughts and so on. So we start about it. And then, bam, we have a global pandemic, something that we hadn't before. So that changed our perspective, that changed our priorities. We thought about lowering our CO2 emissions because of climate. But then within an economy which is down due to the global pandemic, how to reboost them. So are we throwing away all of our good terms again? And now, especially here in Europe, we see a war, a potential nuclear war, which I thought we are over that. I mean, I was quite young when the SS-20 were stationed in the Eastern Bloc, and we had the American pendants on the other side. So, but that is present again. So it is a different priority, and it's not something where we say, okay, no, let's fix the first ones, and then we come to the other one. So everything is grabbing our attention and cries for solution. And now space comes in. And here I think, I don't have an answer. I absolutely don't have an answer how we can do that. I mean, we do our dialogue on space here, of course, and we will keep that ongoing, but in our limits.
Well, one of the many research things, and again, I try to do my small part to at least raise some issues, and that is we have very good snapshot tools to take. We take snapshots of systems, we take snapshots of politics, we take snapshots of space debris, snapshots of climate, and there's so much information, there's so much work to be done diving into the detail of those snapshots. But we don't have very good tools, and we can at least start with the mental frameworks to add the dynamic factor. These things are not happening in a snapshot. They are ongoing, moving, literally moving things, and they are affecting each other. So the human brain is an amazing sense-making machine, and one of the places where we can, I believe, start to make a dent in this perspective is conversations like this, and more conversations everywhere about how these things impact. So I would call out the space industry and the space sector to look at the ways it not just its negative impacts, but how it can support these other things, how they're integrated, how it's a win-win.
Before we run out of time, I would like to have your input on something that you mentioned earlier, design thinking for space, social science, expanded system thinking, all of these methods. Can you lead us quickly through that, and why is that essential?
Well, I think it comes back to the fact that on a very, very basic level, humanity has been looking up at the heavens since time immemorial. And we have a deep emotional connection to it, to the sense of the heavens. And I just feel like it's time to ask again the questions about humans, putting humans as a consideration into the space conversation. So design thinking of human-centered design, we've been designing understandably to overcome massive engineering challenges in the space sector. And again, I'd say we believe now that more and more of these things will get resolved. And that is happening. That's an investment of brain power and engineering know-how and funding. But we haven't invested anything close to a similar commitment to making sure that there is something worth being out there for, and that we will do it well, that we'll do anything any better. And I don't think it's enough to just explore in a set of stations. We know better, we know our patterns. So let's set in place things that work even in a basic framework. I mean, look at how Antarctica is run, right? It's very much an international operation. And so what can we do on a basic and on a profound level to put humans, the human factor, back into the conversations of planning for and building out a near space future that supports Earth and the betterment of humanity, even despite itself. It's not about predicting some particular form of governance. It's about asking better questions about how we want to be human in space.
I don't have so often the chance to ask in somebody who is in the innovation so deep involved like you. So I'm just shooting out for that. So what are innovations you may expect or you would love to see in the foreseeable future? I mean, in the time frame that we will.
Well, I think honestly, one of the most incredible opportunities is the choice that to invest in this dual space technology era of so I'll give you an example. So, membranes, right? That's a great example to me of something that you could see the ROI for the investors early. You can see the application in the poor quality or lack of water here on Earth, and then can see that technology also applying to space, to travel, and to colonies soon in real time, and that's incredible. And we talk about climate change as only a disaster, and it is. On the other hand, it is also times of great change are also times of focus and opportunity, both business-wise and humans going, okay, we at some point we have to quit squabbling and we have to do this thing, and that is happening whether people want to or not. And regions and companies and countries that treat it as, it's like a big storm's coming. Well, you have a choice, right? How are you gonna react to that? How are you going to prepare for it? And there are policies, and there are businesses, and there are many things that come out of that. And so I think that's to me, that's a way to step into action right now, is to accelerate IP transfer. So I think that a real innovation is better, faster IP transfer and better, faster funding of these things that have benefits in both places.
One last question I would like to take from Dwayne, and it's just a yes and no. So is the International Space Station an example of human cooperation despite tensions?
It absolutely is. It's remarkable. I mean, it's ancient, and it's time for new stations, but it's a marvel. So frankly, are the treaties that have kept weapons of mass destruction out of space, despite the Cold War, despite so many things. Like, good for us. Some things have worked, and it is astonishing. I
take it as a yes.
Yeah, it's a yes.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Laura, for this wonderful 33 minutes. And I'm afraid we have to come to an end, because our production team is flagging the red flags again and again. Right. Well, but I really would love to enjoy the continuity of our inspiring talks with you at a certain stage. So over to Chiara.
Thank you so much. This has been really inspirational to listen to. So thank you, Laura. Before we finish for today, I would like to tell you all about our next upcoming events. So on the 31st of March this week, we have our next Space Café Greater Bay Area, China, with Blaine Curcio, and he will be interviewed by Dr. Emagati and Torsten Kriening. So definitely tune in for that one. And on Friday, the 1st of April, we have our white label event on health systems and humanitarian aid, the race against COVID-19. And then the next week, we have a lot of great events as well. So on the 5th of April, we kick it off with our 33 minutes with Catherine Cavada. And then on the 6th of April, we have our next Space Café Italy by the wonderful Dr. Emagati, who will be talking to Dr. Luca Rosanetti from The Orbit. And then on the 7th of April, we have two great events. In the morning, or at least the morning for us, we have our Space Café Australia by Annie Hanmer. on launchers down under. And then later in the day, we have our next Mariva's Vox Populi, where they will be discussing the question, what evidence constitutes harmful interference in space? And on the 8th of April, there's the second event of Elephant in the Room by Powering Space on addressing abuse and harassment in the space sector. All events are going to be online on Eventbrite, as usual. And as always, we love to hear your feedback. So please check in with us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Don't forget to sign up for our daily and our bi-weekly newsletters. And if you want to treat yourselves to something special, become a Space Watcher today or help us out in the supporter program. Again, a huge thanks to Laura for the inspiring talk and for being our guest. And a big thank you to the entire team behind the scenes for doing that great job week in and week out. I hope that you all stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for asking your questions. I hope to see you in our next events this week and in the following weeks. And in the meantime, visit our website and follow us on social media. And don't forget, become a Space Watcher. Thank you so much.